Hi everyone, Jenny Murphy here. Welcome to another episode of the Google Plus Platform Office Hours. Today we're going to have an open questions and answer session. So now is your chance to ask us anything and everything about developing on the Google Plus platform. So about the REST APIs, Hangout APIs, even our dinosaur. So before we get going, I'm going to introduce the people around me. So starting with the people who are joining me in person at the Googleplex, we have
Chirag Shah, Developer Programs Engineer on the Google Plus platform.
And I'm Silvano Luciani, Developer Programs Engineer in EMEA for the Google Plus platform.
Yes, you flew in all the way from London for us today, right?
And I'm still jet lagged.
And you're still jet lagged? Well, thanks for getting up. And joining us via the magic of Hangouts in no particular order, specifically the order from left to right in my little film script at the bottom of the Hangout. Starting with you, Alan.
Hi there, I'm Alan Furstenberg. I'm a outside developer that does Hangout Apps primarily.
And next, how about Chad?
I'm Chad Lafarge. I'm in Columbia, Missouri. I developed Pro Studio. We might touch on that later on, but I'm relatively new to Hangout extension development.
Great. And Charles?
I'm Charles Jamett. I'm a developer in Canada and one of the co-developers of Tabletop Forge, which is a Hangout app for playing games.
And Fraser?
My name is Fraser Kane. I'm the publisher of Universe Today, and we've been doing a virtual star party on Google Plus where we connect telescopes into Hangouts.
Gerwin?
Yeah, I'm Gavin from Austria. I'm mostly probably well known for the Comment Tracker extension, and I recently did the Hangout Band Hangout app, which is fun, I think. Yeah.
Very cool. And last but not least, Jason.
Hi everybody, I'm Jason Salas and I am from Guam, where it is about 4:50 in the morning right now, so I got up and I'm very, very happy to be with you fine folks and everybody out there streaming on the net. I am a software developer and a sportscaster and a marketer for a large TV station out here and everything, and I do a lot of R&D, specifically with the Hangout API, and really excited to be here and everything and just talk about some of the neat stuff that's going on in our community.
Great. Okay, thanks for the intros, everyone. So while we wait for the questions to queue up, there is some news that is pretty exciting that I've been following for a while. The Tabletop Forge has launched a KickStarter and is achieving great success so far. And I think some of you here know something about that.
Well, what do you want to know about? We put the Kickstarter up on Saturday morning, and Joshua Owen and I, who put it up along with two others, Joseph Schnur and Andrew Chasen, who did our design. It was our first Kickstarter, so we were all very nervous the night before, and we hit our goal in one day. So we put up what we thought was a fairly modest hittable goal of $5,000, which seems to be the sort of standard amount and enough to get us going. And we hit that by Sunday morning. We had to put up a stretch goal, and then we had to put up a second stretch goal, and we're now $413, my math is bad today, away from hitting that goal. So we got another one lined up.
Okay, so you have another stretch goal lined up after that one?
Yeah. Jonathan Roberts, who does a lot of RPG maps, is going to give us a license to a bunch of his maps. So basically, the Kickstarter, the app is a way to play role-playing games online in a Google Hangout. So role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons is probably the most well-known, but then there are hundreds of others that allow you to create a fantasy or sci-fi or historic setting, and for a number of people to play characters inside that setting, and then to explore the world. And it's a strategy, tactical game. It's also a collective storytelling game. Depends entirely on how you play it and which rule set you use. But normally it's played at a table, and then you've got on the tabletop in front of you sometimes a map, sometimes some pictures, some visual aids to play the game. Sometimes people use little miniatures to represent themselves going through rooms. you roll dice, and we've reproduced that experience in the Hangouts, which is pretty cool. It makes the game actually work, so you can see what somebody else has rolled, as opposed to somebody rolling their die off camera and saying, "Oh, I got a 12," you know. So so that's been our experience, and the Kickstarter is mostly about trying to get. Right now, it looks like something designed by programmers, which it is. And what we want it to look like is something designed by designers with beautiful artists' work in there, and because that's what really makes things pop. People are very visual, so we're getting indie designers and indie cartographers and game developers to license their works to us so that we can incorporate them into the app. That's basically the gist of it.
Very cool. Yeah, I've always loved this application because it's a great example of something really cool you can do with Hangout apps that are hard to do on other platforms. Hangout apps are a lot like kind of having a kitchen table in front of you, and applications that leverage that kind of metaphor seem to work really well. And the best ones are where you can start to do things in the Hangout that are hard to do in reality. For example, in tabletop gaming, it's hard to roll a 1 or 7-sided die. But having Hangout apps, you can do it, and it actually seems to make games flow really well. And Tabletop Forge is a great example of leveraging Hangout apps in that way.
Thanks. Actually, Fraser, it's funny, Fraser's always in these Hangouts when I'm in them. Fraser is the reason that I got into building in Hangout apps in the first place. He and I were playing a game called Ars Magica in his living room, which I think you can actually see behind him. We used to go in there once a week and on Tuesdays and play this game, Ars Magica. And then slowly people drifted away from the game. They had obligations. Some guy got a girlfriend, the nerve, and then moved to another city. And it just kind of fell apart. And we decided we'd take a look at doing it in Hangouts. And that's where I got programming, and that's where I met Josh. And I don't even have a physical game anymore that I go to. I keep nagging Fraser to start up an Ars Magica game again, but all my gaming now is online through Hangouts, and it works really, really well. And I've met some really cool people too in the process, which has been the added benefit that I didn't really expect. I just thought, I'll get my game going, I'll find a couple of people, but really I've played with some of the people whose rule books I've read. You get connected to these really amazing people, and then they play, and you go, oh wow, I didn't know you could even I didn't even know you could play that way. It's kind of like playing chess in your basement for your entire life, and then all of a sudden you get online and you can play with Gary Kasparov.
Yeah, geography just doesn't matter anymore.
No.
Like you can just like Charles says, we live in a small town. It's brutal to try and get an actual gaming group together, especially for something that's really obscure like Ars Magica that we like to play. So, but boy, there's a thread on Google Plus right now that has 30 people who love the game and really want to play in a Hangout. So, we could easily put together a group from all those people, and instead of having to drag people kicking and screaming into a game system they don't understand, you've got people who are totally into playing the game. So it's just great. Geography just doesn't matter anymore.
Well, it's really cool. Yeah, I can't wait to see what other cool things along this line people come up with in the future.
Yeah, I think also a great achievement of such an application is that it's easy for players to join because all the game engine is simplified, but you keep the role-playing aspect because you are role-playing your character in the Hangout, and you can be the wizard, the fighter, the whatever it is, and actually role-play, which is great.
Yep. Always great. Cool.
Have you guys tried it out yet?
I have tried it out very little beyond our experiences in these Hangouts, unfortunately. It's a little bit of a busy time here for those of us at Google. We have a conference or something coming up, I hear.
Yeah, so I hear. I hear.
But once that's done, it's definitely like my top Hangout app that I want to start playing with more. Cool. Okie doke. So thanks for filling us in on what's new with Tabletop Forge. Before we go to questions outside of the Hangout, how about inside the Hangout? Because questions are best asked in person. So do any of you have questions for us about your recent developments on the Google Plus platform?
Yeah, I got a question, which is that I love the Pro Studio app for the Hangout, and I love the Comment Tracker app, and I love the lower third one, and yet I can't run all three at the same time. So you've made me choose. And I've had to, and are you ready? My choice is the Comment Tracker, which is just amazing. So it completely changed my life. I gotta say, you know, running, because when we run these Hangouts, we'll have hundreds of people watching. The comments are showing up over on Google+. They're showing up on Twitter. They're showing up on YouTube all at the same time. And I was having to sort of switch windows. And every time I would switch a window, the memory footprint would change, and then my stream would gimp. So anyway, the Comment Tracker is fantastic, and I've been sort of pitching lots of features at Gerwin. But I love the Pro Studio features as well, but I can't run them both at the same time. So will it ever be possible to run multiple apps at the same time?
Well, already today, you can, as I'm sure you know, but maybe not everybody knows, you can run an extension and an application at the same time. An extension being one of those that sits in the side, and the application being one that runs in the rest of the Hangout. And that gives you a little bit of flexibility, but we're definitely the ways that we can expand that. The obvious challenges are that when two Hangout apps use the same features, they can stomp on each other and cause all sorts of headaches for the developers trying to make their apps compatible with other simultaneously running applications. And there are some other challenges we're facing, but it's definitely something we're looking into, and we wanted to. So.
Either that, or just get inspired by these features and build them right into the app, you know, into Hangouts itself, because a lot of them are pretty fundamental. But yeah,
that would definitely work too. If any of them rolled into the main product, that would allow you, it would free up that extension or application slot for one of the other ones.
Yeah, and I would say all three pieces of functionality are pretty core for what you need to do. So, please.
Great feedback. Thanks, John.
And that kind of brings us to the moderation controls that people have been talking about, asking about for a while. Part of the reason why Pro Studio was developed was to try and provide some of those moderation controls. Is Google looking at incorporating greater control for the host or the creator of the Hangout?
We're always looking at adding more features. You know, it all depends on, you know, there's a lot of stuff we want to add to Hangouts, and we're adding new capabilities every day. In terms of what specifically we're adding them and when they're adding them, I'm afraid this is something we don't really talk about because things can change at any time, and we don't want to promise something and not deliver it. But moderation features are definitely something that's on our radar, and we've heard a lot about, but not yet. Hang in there.
And we've been listening to the community, and we're aware of a lot of these features, but we can't talk about future releases.
Yes, we cannot see into the future. Our vision into the future is just as limited as everyone else's.
But it will be awesome.
But it will be awesome. That's the one thing we promise. It will be awesome when it's round, whatever it is. It will be awesome.
We had troubles over the weekend with a Hangout on air when we were trying to run the app, and people weren't able to see the app. People weren't able to see the app with the video. Sort of the main screen. What they were seeing was the full video of the individual people talking, but they couldn't actually see the board or the tokens moving.
Oh, so they had the application installed and running, and it was not rendering?
I had it installed and running. Everybody else in the game did as well, and then we ran an on-air version of it. And what the people watching saw was just they just saw the main video. So what I had to do was, one of the guys screen shared his app, his video window with me, and then I stuck my video on that so that everybody could see that. But it meant that I couldn't use the app. Well, I couldn't roll the dice for myself. I couldn't do anything. So I mean, I would have had to. The ideal workaround would have been to get somebody else who wasn't playing the game to just log in, just so that they could run the on-air and and lock their screen on my window, and then but everybody would only have seen my window then.
Or to be able to have the broadcast user kind of run the app or render the app. And Alan, we were talking this past Friday night about being able to do that.
Yeah, so somebody basically has to be the broadcast user, and then they can't actually be involved in the game in any way.
Yeah, part of the problem is that there's a separate hidden user in a Hangout on Air, and it's basically recording and doing the streaming of the video stream, but it's only looking at the video stream. So, for example, when your app is running, you're not actually modifying the video stream itself. You're just modifying the rest of the screen that's available for your app to run. Kind of a workaround that you could do is that you could have that portion being dumped on top of your video stream, and that would replace your face with what's your application is showing, or use the workaround that you have with another person logging in and sharing it, or eventually convince the Google development team to allow the streaming user to also be running apps. But there are problems with the streaming user running apps as well.
So I'm going for option C there.
Right, but I guess as you develop your app, you'd want some way that you can control portions that gets put out into the video, that you can almost, as you said, you can control the video stream that's being displayed to the public and be able to inject relevant stuff into that stream at the right time. So in our, in the example of the Tabletop Forge, if a person rolls some dice, then everybody's going to want to see the results of that die roll, but it's going to probably look different than the map or whatever that the person is seeing, and so you're going to have something custom that's going to need to be displayed just for the Hangouts on Air.
Well, except that with the API, you can pretty much create that. That's what our app shows, is what we want everybody to see. So we take the main video and we embed it inside the app, and it's a movable window, and you've got another window for your dice, and then behind everything you've got the map. I just want that whole area that's my app area. I want that to be the on-air video stream. So pretty please.
Yep. So that's a pretty good summary of that situation. So right now, the way to share a Hangout app on air is to screen share someone running the application, which then has all those problems you mentioned of you're only seeing one user's view, and then it also that user cannot use the app the same way as they would be able to otherwise. And there are some interesting challenges we want to make sure we get right. For example, if you are broadcasting a game of poker, each one of the players is going to only be able to see their cards and not the cards of the other people involved in the poker game. And we have the kind of open question of what is the kind of headless, the Hangout user stream look like? Is it everyone's cards? Is it no one's cards? Is it something that's up to the application developer? And will the application developer have to support this feature? And those are things that we still have open questions that we're working through, but this is definitely something we're aware of.
That same sort of privacy, public space is probably going to come up with us too. We've had people ask us if they can have separate desktops that are just their own or tabletops that are just their own, so that you would have a shared space that every player could see, but then some games involve cards as well, and you'd want to be able to hide your own cards. But if you could just flag divs or elements in the video that were private and public, that would solve our problems at least. I imagine it would do the same. Whatever worked for poker would work for us.
It's an interesting solution, because right now the way you would handle different players with different cards is your app will have to be, your instance of the Hangout app has to be aware of which cards are yours and display those and hide everyone else's. But since it's all in the web browser, there's always that potential of somebody peeking through with the inspector or something like that. Because the shared state is still shared across all of the users.
We're going to take it one step further and let the GM probably look at everybody's tabletops. Right? Because sometimes some games, especially for new users, you're going to want the GM to be able to look at the person's cards and give some suggestions and say, oh, you want to use this and this together. So the ability to share your tabletop as well as keep it private, or just have one person who's the super user.
It's almost like you want to have somebody thinking like a director, right? Because you've already got these constraints. You've got the constraints of the window. You've got the constraints of the app environment that's inside the window, and then that's what's being broadcast. And so, a director or a cinematographer or a director of photography would say, "Oh, well, here's how we would display these dice being rolled," and it might look completely different than what the people within the app are going to see, but something that's better displayed for the public. You might want to see a really nice 3D rendered 7-sided die rolling down the table, which would look completely different than what the users inside the app would see. They'd probably have something a little more utilitarian, but if you're going to have,
If
poker,
this is
for
broadcast
example,
quality,
right?
you want it to look like broadcast quality.
Yeah, and so the app developer is going to need some way to be able to code in the broadcast quality into the app itself. If poker, I think, is a fantastic example. It deals with every problem all at the same time: the privacy, the public issue, the custom views for every person, and then what does the public see? I don't know how do they do it on a live game of poker, right? When you watch it on TV.
I wonder if you could do like the interface elements or the private things like your cards, and you just do like an animated overlay, keep refreshing the overlay for the public board that everyone should be able to see. Did that make sense? An overlay will broadcast, and your interface would be personal to everyone who's using the app.
Yeah, the problem with that, though, is that your overlay now becomes overwriting the thumbnail at the bottom. That was my first or second suggestion. So I think it's workable as a workaround, but I think long term we would want a way to run these apps on the video user and control that app from somewhere, somehow.
Very cool. Yeah, so this would definitely unlock a lot of really cool potential for broadcasting applications.
Especially for Kickstarters, we ran one game and it got some attention, but because we had such technical issues, because it was the first on-air one that I'd done, I hit Fraser up for some advice, but still it was a bit of a fiasco for the first 15 minutes. It'd be really nice to be able to showcase what it is that you're trying to raise money for in a nice, easy way. So for anybody who's trying to do it, you get one person who's not involved to do the on-air part.
Yeah, I mean, we've found with the number of Hangouts, I mean, I've probably done about 50 Hangouts on air now, and, I mean, maybe it looks really natural, but, I mean, there's a ton of prep work that we go through with every person to make sure their audio, their video, their method of getting their telescope into the Hangout is working properly and looking the way that we want it to look. It's actually a lot of work to kind of get that all done right. So, yeah, I can see trying to show a role-playing game live would have been tough.
It was pretty funny, actually. Because you don't want to be watching your YouTube stream at the same time that you're broadcasting this. So it took a while for us to realize that we were broadcasting nonsense.
And if anyone wants, if you go to my profile page, I've got a great big laundry list of all of my tips and tricks for Hangouts on Air. I've got sort of all of the lessons that I've learned so far. So it's just on my Google Plus profile. There's a link to that.
Great. Well, we'll include that in the show notes for sure.
There's one question from Tom Birmingham on the questions list. Do you have any suggestions on how to port my Android app to run in a Hangout? And that's a really good question. So if you have a native Android application, it's probably written in Java. You first need to rewrite that to use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So all your list views and all of your views will need to be represented as proper HTML DOM elements. And now if your Android application understands the multiplayer components, you can start to use shared state offered by Hangout. So you first need to do some groundwork in porting it over to run on the web browser. And once you've done that, most of the hard work is done. And then you can go on to using the Hangout APIs like shared state.
Well, there's an interesting idea. I mean, that's very clever because that also introduces the possibility of, say, like if somebody develops like an app, like a game or something like that, and say, I mean, sorry to bring up the licensing thing, but like if somebody's playing Monopoly, you could have some players playing on an Android device and then some players also playing in a Hangout, and you could actually bridge the two platforms at the same time, not necessarily like one or the other, but you could possibly bring in, Hangout people playing with people that are truly on mobile devices.
That would be really cool. It would require your own system to do some of that synchronization, because the shared state provided by the Hangout is only available in the Hangout itself, the Hangout that's running. If you want to start to involve other devices and other sources like a web front end or a mobile application and have them playing the same real-time game, that is definitely possible, but you're going to have to, it will then be the responsibility of the developer to figure out a way to synchronize those states between the multiple platforms. And that will probably be, it might be kind of challenging depending on what's happening in the game. And it would be really cool to see if someone did take a swing at that.
Anything really time sensitive is going to be more difficult. But yeah, having a central server kind of be the proxy to communicate between the different platforms. As long as a couple of 100 milliseconds isn't going to make a difference, it'd be cool.
Yeah, which is the unfortunate part is it requires them to re-implement a lot of features that make Hangout apps really cool. And they'll probably have to come up with interesting ways to bridge that, like have one designated user in the Hangout be the one that synchronizes with the server. And I'm sure that when someone attempts this, they'll come up with lots of really interesting best practices and recommendations.
Let us know if you get around to doing that.
Yeah, if you start to port your Android app, another implementation starting from an Android app that might probably be just as much work. Couldn't you run it as an applet? Because then at least it's Java. But then you're going to have to re-implement all the interface features in applet, and then you have an applet, which is not very 21st century. And then you'll have to write all the bridging code. So don't do that.
Hello, 1998. Well, I have a question, if I may, unless you guys are going to read something. Well, just a real quick update on my Hangout app development. Mine has actually stymied because I don't know if some of you guys know that I was actually working on an app to allow paid Netflix subscribers to actually be able to watch movies and enjoy them within the same Hangout app and everything like that. Kind of running into a little bit of roadblocks with Netflix themselves. So if anybody's watching this from Netflix, please answer my emails. I just want to know, like if it is possible in the whole bridging solution. We're trying to use the Silverlight player over the Hangout paradigm and doing some of the authentication stuff, but I don't want to wax political. But that's kind of where I'm at with that. But I would really love to pull that off. Even if Netflix is working on that right now, I would just love to know if they are, and I will happily stand by, because there are a lot of people that would certainly like to take advantage of that, of paying members being able to watch the same movie securely, privately, and legally. But the larger point I wanted to bring up, and I know I've posted about this, and Jenny and I have talked about this privately, but I think the facility that you guys at Google have provided us with before Hangouts start is really cool. You get that standby screen, or I think the default screen is we'll be starting in a few minutes, and in many different languages and everything, which is really slick. But I had an idea, and I was wondering, obviously this is beyond us as developers, but would you be able to provide the ability for us to run pre-Hangout apps? Basically being, using the phrase out of band for lack of a better term, but seeing as how many Hangouts on air don't always start on time, people wait for other contributors to jump in, or the producer just, they run behind schedule. But coming from the TV industry, I've always thought it was cool where, we put up that screen, it's like, sorry, we'll be back in a minute, technical difficulties. But we can extend that because we're on the internet and say, if I'm running a show and I'm running a few minutes late, I would actually be able to hook into some sort of data source to say, here's a bunch of stock quotes, here's the ball game score, here's what's coming up on your TV cable system or anything, or here's my Google Plus stream and everything like that. So we'd be able to run some sort of data-centric, some sort of interactive application and everything before the Hangout starts, and then when we actually truly broadcast and go live, then the regular stream kicks in.
We had a similar problem with that as well, was when we were doing the Venus transit coverage. So we were broadcasting the entire transit of Venus on Google Plus, and it was great. It was 6.5 hours of broadcast, which we ran into your 4-hour limit, which was an interesting discovery. But it was really hard to promote it in advance because the actual location of the stream didn't exist until we began the stream. So there was no easy way to tell people, by the way, we're going to be doing this event at this location in 5 days. So that was the amount of lead time that we had to do. So really, we had to tell people that we're going to be doing something, but to then come and dig around on Google Plus until they find it. Now, we were able to create a redirection from a couple of websites to create a more permanent URL, but the reality was there was just no way. And so I think it would be a very similar way that if you could somehow reserve a location, a permanent location, a permalink to your event, that before that event begins, before you click broadcast, then there's a notification that it is coming in the future and even perhaps when it's going to be happening. And then when you start to broadcast, the two are connected together, and then your broadcast takes over at that location. And I think that would also probably solve part of the problems that Jason's saying, where you would, if you could somehow even be even more clever and put more information in advance or run video or whatever, then, you know, ahead of time you'd be able to see what's going to be coming at that location.
Yeah, so I think this two issues there, I think they're both really valid. If you want to run something before your video started and not just a blank screen, you could screen share a PowerPoint presentation or a website that cycles through slides, sort of like the movie theaters do with the question and answer and the, you know, this actor appeared in 7 shows before he appeared on Lost kind of thing. The other one that what Fraser was talking about being able to reserve a location, I think ties into a bigger issue that I was thinking about the other day, which is stuff slides through my stream so fast, and I go back looking for it, and I often can't find it. So I'll have a conversation with somebody I noticed it during the run-up to the KickStarter. I'd have a conversation with somebody, and we'd work out the details, and then a week and a half later, I'd go, oh, where's that? And I wouldn't be able to find it again. And it was there. Eventually I found it, but it would be really nice to be able to bookmark or to sort of have an internal way of bookmarking threads in Google+, right? So that I can have not just circles, but I can have a list of threads that I'm trying to keep an eye on. Then that would solve Fraser's problem, I think, that you'd be able to put out the note and say, coming up soon is going to be the, you know, in 5 days we're going to do the Venus transit, and then people would be able to bookmark that, and then when it comes out again, they'd be able to just sort of keep an eye on it. I don't know if that would totally solve Fraser's problem, but that would solve some other issues that are...
We just need to be able to, you know, if we're going to have an event that's going to happen and we're going to be brought, you know, the next big chance is the Curiosity rover is going to be landing on Mars in August or July. Anyway, we're going to be doing live coverage of that landing. But the problem is that, you know, we have to do our publicity, get our press release out, tell everybody 2 weeks in advance, a week in advance, so that everyone can write their articles and they can have a place to go. And it would be great if that place was on YouTube or on Google+. That just says, yep, they type in the URL, boom, they go there and it's happening. If they show up an hour early, then they just see a screen that says it's not here yet. And if they show up, you know, an hour later, then it's in progress.
And you've configured your channel to broadcast when someone goes to your channel's homepage. If there's a live event, that it automatically streams. You know, Mike Downs has done a lot of experimentation and documentation of that. You could also set up like the landing page for people to go to, and as you're beginning that Hangout and you're about to broadcast it, embed that video on that landing page, or like an event page.
That's another great idea. So these are all things we're aware of, and you've already mentioned some workarounds for some of these cases. And there's actually one that you guys didn't mention a workaround to, which is the basically bookmarking posts on important discussions and stuff on using Google Plus itself. And there is a workaround for this that I use pretty often. I've created a circle. Mine is called empty. It has no one in it, but you could call it favorite threads. And what I do is when there's a thread I know I need to go back to, I will reshare that post to that circle. And then I go look at that circle, and I can see all those very important posts.
Right, okay.
And it's a little bit of a kind of a wonky workaround, but it actually works pretty well.
Interesting.
I didn't think of that. That's really awesome.
Yeah, it was an idea that someone actually mentioned during one of these Hangouts. I forgot who though. So I'm not taking credit for that. I didn't promote that. So that's an answer from the community.
So would it be possible if you guys were to be able to provide the infrastructure where we could actually run like apps or extensions prior to a Hangout going live?
So pre-roll applications are kind of an interesting case because there's no one who will really interact with it. So it's not going to be able to take it's not going to be able to take advantage of all of the cool features that make Hangout apps special. It's just going to be a regular HTML5 application. But that's still pretty cool, and you can actually do that today using a little bit of workaround that was actually mentioned, is just doing screen sharing. So you take your application that uses it, pulls in data, pulls in stock quotes or relevant information or trivia about the people who are about to be on the Hangout, and then you run that web application in a regular browser and screen share it, and you'll actually get probably about 90% of the way there. But that all being said, pre-roll applications would be something that would overlap a lot with the kind of Hangout view of an application itself. So it is something we're aware of, and it would be cool, but I don't have much else to say about it.
No, that's cool. I mean, I was thinking, that would be kind of like a logical thing to do just for, people out there. And maybe, I know that that's a fair amount of work just for something that niche and that specific. But I mean, maybe subcategorize and say you can have a Hangout app, or you can have a Hangout extension, or you can have a Hangout pre-roll service and everything like that, just so they won't, you can even further sandbox it just so it's fairly like limited and everything, and you don't have to. If you're still running the screen share, then you hear everybody else's audio feed running underneath it, and if you're the host, you have to mute everybody and everything. But no, I totally get it. I mean, that would functionally that would totally work.
Yep, we're definitely aware of the larger problem of being able to have Hangouts, specifically Hangouts on Air, that are make it easier for people to find the Hangouts on Air that they're interested in and be able to get to them when it's relevant. And the workaround of having a pre-roll, which we've used, and the Android developer relations team also has put a lot of work into their pre-rolls, is one of the ways that we've kind of added a 5 or 10 minute buffer where people have an opportunity to reshare and queue up for the broadcast before it begins. But the larger problem of being able to find the Hangouts on Air that are interesting to you is something we're definitely interested in.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. So we're actually getting pretty close to out of time. Do we have any questions from the rest of the world we want to tackle before we start to wrap up?
I think we've covered most of the questions.
Cool. That's great. How
Jenny,
about,
I'm totally stealing your idea about resharing. It's brilliant.
Oh, great. Well, we stole it from the Android developer relations team, so feel free to pass that information along to everyone. It works really well.
Yeah, we've been using that pre-roll technique, the one that you did on this Hangout, and it's fantastic. It, again, sort of minimizes the freak out in the first 5 minutes when you're trying to get all your preparation done, but you need to be public, so that's fantastic.
We also get a really great audio track of the people in the Hangout during the pre-roll slide. That's always a really fun bonus feature. If you join and there's some audio there, whether it be music or just people chatting about the weather.
I have a couple of really short questions, if I may.
Of course.
Are we making any progress on having like a host ID for an on-air in the API and trash collection, like clearing image resources?
So the 2 questions in there. The first one is having a specific Hangout user that is the host of the Hangout and having that exposed via the Hangouts API.
Exactly.
That would be really cool. The only place there's kind of a concept of the host right now is when a Hangout is on air, because there's the person broadcasting it. In other Hangout situations, the Hangout itself kind of lives beyond individuals in it, and it can kind of keep moving on. Mm-hmm. So for that reason, the concept of a host ID is something it's a bigger challenge where we're still kind of working on figuring that out.
I like the creator ID in the context of a regular Hangout.
That would definitely be a good place to start. We don't have that yet.
I'm aware.
And it's moderation controls in general, and especially exposing stuff like that to the API are something that's on our radar. But nothing to report right now. And then what was your second question?
Garbage collection. If we have too many image resources, that just stacks up in the memory and ultimately can crash. So I'm wondering if we have anything on the way to clear those resources.
So clearing the attached image and audio resources has gotten a little bit better. If you may have noticed, especially since it's gotten much better than a few months ago, and we're working to keep continually improving that. But you're right, you can still load up a lot of image resources. I think in the last bench test I did, it was for me it was a couple thousand JPEGs before it wiped out. But there's a lot of cool cases where you'll want to load a ton of image resources over the life of the Hangout. For example, if you want a little video feed in the corner or something. We're working on it.
Okay.
I just have one more quick one, unless we're running out of time, Jenny.
Go ahead.
Okay. The facial tracking feature is absolutely phenomenal. I know people, especially some people in this room are doing some, brilliant work with it. But I ran into a situation last night where I was writing an HTML5 game, and then I had built it out to say, support keyboard, support possibly gamepad, support mouse features and everything like that. But I was like, this would be really cool, and I want to extend it for Hangouts. If I would be able to have it support not necessarily my face, but my hands. So would it be possible to extend the API to, in addition to doing facial tracking, at least the inside of my palms, if not, every one of my fingers, either independently or collectively?
That's a really great question. I have a little experience with it. Do you guys have?
You can find, there's a lot, but several open source JavaScript libraries that provide tracking for hands and everything. I don't know how it will work. So if you want to experiment with it and let us know how it works, we will be very happy. Because the problem can be like you have the face and you have the hands, and all the examples that I've seen are usually they just show the hands and then they show the point. But you can see only the hand in the video. And what I'm wondering is, you are in Hangout, the scene is not that big and there's a lot of elements. I'm not really sure how it will work in the end, but it would be cool.
That actually brings up a question that we had in the mailing list. The biggest problem with doing that, though, is that we have no way to get the video image that's currently being displayed right now. Is that correct, or is there a way that I'm not aware of that we can get a frame of what's currently going out on the video in order to do that kind of analysis?
You have not missed anything. That's correct. You can't get the video stream or the frames yet. That's definitely something that we know would unlock a lot of potential for features like this. But it is not available yet. Hang tight. Specifically in regard to hand tracking, I've done a little bit of playing with these things in the past, and I've noticed that the hand tracking algorithms are significantly more computationally expensive than facial tracking for some reason.
Yeah.
I'll turn that into
But you can just draw a face on your hand and then it works.
Or it's symbol recognition, like on some augmented reality setups where you can print a symbol on a card and move the card around the screen. It replaces the symbol on the card by just the pattern recognition. That would be easier than hand.
Well, also I'm thinking because, if you're monitoring and you're tracking your hands also, and the system is already monitoring, the position of your eyebrows, each eye, and your lips and everything, and then you've got your hands moving around and your fingers in whatever type of, configuration. Those are floating, and those are actually going on top of your face, so those might also conflict with your facial tracking anyway, I would think. But yeah, I would also assume that would really slow down your machine.
It is a complicated problem to solve. Oh, look it up. Well, unless there are any other questions, we're probably going to wrap it up for the day. Anything else from the streams?
I think that's about it.
Great. Okie doke. Well, thanks so much for joining us, everyone. It was another great session of the office hours. Thanks for coming, especially those of you who either fought jet lag or rolled out of bed at really early in the morning to come and join us on here. So we'll be seeing you later, broadcasting from a different location, currently undisclosed. But you'll find out soon enough. Okay, bye everyone.
Thanks.
Hey, Jenny, thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.